December 19th, 1944. Ardennes Forest, Belgium. The morning mist clung to the frozen ground as Obergefreiter Klaus Weber crouched in his hastily dug foxhole, listening to the distant rumble of American tank engines approaching through the Belgian countryside. The Battle of the Bulge had been raging for 3 days, and Weber's unit had pushed deeper into Allied territory than any German force since 1940. His confidence remained high. German armor was superior, German tactics were proven, and the Americans were clearly retreating in disorder before the Wehrmacht's final offensive. Weber adjusted his grip on his Panzerfaust, the single-shot anti-tank weapon that represented his squad's only defense against American armor. Through the morning gloom, he could see the distinctive silhouettes of Sherman tanks moving between the snow-covered trees, their engines coughing in the cold air. These were the same tanks that German forces had been destroying throughout the European campaign. Thin-skinned, undergunned vehicles that burned easily when struck by German anti-tank fire. Weber had seen dozens of them knocked out during the retreat from Normandy. But something was different about these Shermans. As they emerged from the tree line, Weber noticed unusual structures mounted on their turret tops, massive racks of metallic tubes that looked like some kind of artillery system. The modifications were so bizarre that Weber initially wondered if the Americans had captured German rocket launchers and somehow mounted them on tank chassis. The sight was so unexpected that he hesitated, trying to understand what he was observing. The first Sherman stopped in a clearing 800 meters from Weber's position, its crew apparently preparing for some kind of firing procedure. Weber watched through his binoculars as the tank commander raised his hand, then dropped it in a signal that would change Weber's understanding of American military capabilities forever. Suddenly, the air filled with a mechanical howling that grew louder and more terrifying with each passing second. White trails of smoke and fire erupted from the tank's mysterious tube assembly, streaking across the sky like meteors fired from hell itself. In the space of 15 seconds, 60 rockets rained down on Weber's position with precision that seemed impossible from a mobile platform. The explosions came so fast they sounded like a single continuous detonation that shook the earth and collapsed foxholes across the entire German defensive line. Trees splintered, frozen ground erupted in geysers of dirt and debris, and the concussion waves knocked Weber unconscious before he could fully comprehend what had struck his unit. What would you do, trapped under a storm of rockets falling 4 per second? The development of the Calliope rocket launcher system represented American industrial innovation at its most creative and destructive, born from the urgent need to provide mobile artillery support that could keep pace with rapidly advancing armored formations during the European campaign. By late 1943, American commanders had recognized that traditional towed artillery, while effective, could not provide the immediate fire support necessary for breakthrough operations against prepared German defensive positions that featured extensive bunker systems and coordinated anti-tank defenses. The concept originated with Colonel John Mickey, an American ordnance officer who observed Soviet Katyusha rocket attacks during intelligence exchanges with Allied forces on the Eastern Front. Mickey recognized that multiple rocket launchers could deliver devastating firepower in concentrated bursts, but he also understood that existing truck-mounted systems were vulnerable to German counter-artillery and lacked the armor protection necessary for frontline operations. His solution was revolutionary: mount rocket launching systems directly onto Sherman tank chassis, creating mobile platforms that combined artillery firepower with armored protection. American industrial engineers approached the Calliope project with characteristic enthusiasm for mechanical innovation and mass production techniques that had already transformed American military capabilities across multiple theaters. The Chrysler Corporation's Detroit tank arsenal became the primary development center, where automotive engineers applied assembly line thinking to military rocket systems. Their goal was ambitious: create a weapon system that could be rapidly manufactured, easily installed on existing Sherman tanks, and operated by standard tank crews without extensive specialized training. The technical challenges were enormous. Rocket launching systems generated tremendous heat, blast effects, and recoil forces that could damage tank components or injure crew members. The mounting system had to be sturdy enough to withstand combat conditions, while remaining light enough to preserve tank mobility and mechanical reliability. Most importantly, the rockets themselves needed guidance systems accurate enough to hit targets at useful ranges while being simple enough for mass production under wartime conditions. The solution emerged through months of intensive testing at Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland, where American engineers developed the T-34 Calliope system that could mount 60 4.5-inch M8 rockets on a standard Sherman tank turret. The rocket tubes were arranged in multiple banks that could be elevated and traversed using the tank's existing turret controls, enabling precise targeting while maintaining the mobility and protection that made the Sherman effective in combined arms operations. The system could fire individual rockets or entire salvos with devastating effect. The M8 rockets themselves represented significant advances in American ordnance technology, incorporating high-explosive warheads, improved propellant systems, and simple but effective guidance mechanisms that provided accuracy sufficient for area bombardment missions. Each rocket weighed 38.9 pounds and carried an 8.3-pound high-explosive warhead that could penetrate light fortifications while creating blast effects powerful enough to destroy personnel and equipment across wide areas. The psychological impact was even more significant than the physical destruction. German intelligence services were completely unaware of American Calliope development throughout 1943 and early 1944, despite extensive espionage networks and technical intelligence gathering operations that had successfully identified most American weapons programs. The secrecy surrounding rocket launcher development was so effective that German commanders received no advance warning about capabilities that would fundamentally alter their tactical planning and psychological preparation for defensive operations against American armored forces. The first Calliope-equipped Sherman tanks arrived in Europe during the summer of 1944, just after the Normandy landings. But they were held in reserve for special operations that would maximize their psychological impact while maintaining operational security. American commanders understood that the shock value of rocket-equipped tanks would be greatest during their initial combat employment, and they wanted to ensure maximum effectiveness when German forces first encountered the new weapon system. Training programs for Calliope crews emphasized rapid deployment, accurate targeting, and coordinated operations with conventional armored units that would maximize the system's effectiveness while protecting the vulnerable rocket-launching platforms from German anti-tank weapons. Crews learned to position their tanks for optimal firing angles while maintaining escape routes that would enable rapid withdrawal after rocket salvos were completed. The tactics were designed to minimize exposure while maximizing psychological impact on German defenders. The strategic timing of Calliope deployment was carefully coordinated with larger American offensive operations that would benefit most from the psychological disruption that rocket attacks could create among German forces. American planners recognized that defensive lines held by demoralized troops would be easier to penetrate than positions defended by confident, well-prepared soldiers. The Calliope was designed as much for psychological warfare as for physical destruction. American industrial capacity enabled rapid production and deployment of Calliope systems once testing was completed and operational requirements were finalized. By December 1944, more than 800 Sherman tanks had been equipped with rocket launching systems, representing production rates that exceeded German manufacturing capabilities for comparable weapons by enormous margins. The scale of deployment ensured that Calliope-equipped units could appear at multiple points along the front simultaneously. The technical sophistication of American rocket systems reflected advances in chemistry, metallurgy, and precision manufacturing that exceeded German capabilities in several critical areas, despite German innovations in rocket technology for different applications. American rockets featured more reliable propellants, better guidance systems, and higher production quality that ensured consistent performance under combat conditions. German rocket systems, while innovative, suffered from material shortages and quality control problems that reduced their reliability. The psychological preparation for combat employment emphasized the importance of surprise and overwhelming firepower in creating maximum impact on German morale and tactical effectiveness. American commanders understood that German forces had adapted to conventional artillery and tank attacks, but rocket systems represented something entirely new that could disrupt German defensive planning and coordination. The goal was to create chaos and fear that would facilitate breakthrough operations by conventional forces. December 20, 1944, O-rate 15 hours, near Malmedy, Belgium. Staff Sergeant Mike Patterson commanded Sherman Tank Thunder Road, one of 12 Calliope-equipped vehicles assigned to break through German defensive positions that had been holding up the American advance for 36 hours. The German line was anchored by log bunkers, interconnected trenches, and carefully positioned anti-tank guns that had already knocked out 6 conventional Sherman tanks attempting to penetrate the position through direct assault. Patterson's tank carried 60 M8 rockets mounted in 4 banks of 15 tubes each, creating a weapon system that could deliver more explosive power in a single salvo than an entire battery of conventional artillery. The rocket tubes were mounted on a rotating platform above the tank's turret, enabling precise targeting while maintaining the mobility and armor protection that made Sherman tanks effective in combined operations. The sight of the unusual mounting had already attracted curious stares from infantry soldiers who had never seen anything like it. The German defensive position occupied a ridgeline that dominated the surrounding countryside, with interlocking fields of fire that covered all likely approaches for conventional armored attacks. German engineers had spent weeks preparing bunkers, trenches, and obstacle systems that channeled American forces into killing zones where anti-tank guns and Panzerfaust teams could engage targets at close range. The position was considered impregnable by conventional assault methods, requiring either massive artillery preparation or costly frontal attacks that would result in heavy casualties. Patterson positioned his Sherman hull down behind a small hill that concealed his tank from German observation while providing clear lines of sight to the enemy position. The rocket launching system required precise range calculations and careful attention to wind conditions that could affect rocket trajectory over the 200-meter distance to target. Patterson's gunner, Corporal Tony Rodriguez, used the tank's optical rangefinder to calculate exact distances while adjusting for the elevation difference between firing position and target area. The firing sequence began with elevation and traverse adjustments that positioned the rocket tubes for optimal coverage of the German defensive line. The Calliope system could fire individual rockets for precision targeting or entire salvos for area bombardment, depending on tactical requirements and target characteristics. For this mission, Patterson planned to fire all 60 rockets in rapid succession, creating a concentrated barrage that would overwhelm German defenders through sheer volume of explosive power delivered in minimal time. The first rockets launched with a distinctive whooshing sound that grew into a mechanical roar as successive rounds left their tubes at 4-second intervals. White exhaust trails marked the rockets' paths across the morning sky, creating visible evidence of the devastating firepower headed toward German positions. The sight was simultaneously beautiful and terrifying, 60 streaks of death arcing through the air with mathematical precision toward targets that had no defense against such concentrated firepower. German soldiers in the defensive position had approximately 45 seconds to observe the approaching rockets and attempt to take cover before the first explosions began impacting their lines. Obergefreiter Heinrich Müller, commanding a machine gun position in the center of the defensive line, watched the approaching rockets with fascination and growing terror as he realized that his carefully prepared bunker offered no protection against bombardment of such intensity and precision. The rockets struck the German position with devastating effect that exceeded even optimistic American predictions for the weapon system's performance. Each 8.3-pound warhead created blast effects equivalent to artillery shells, but the rapid succession of impacts prevented German defenders from recovering between explosions. Bunkers collapsed under repeated hits, trenches caved in from concussion effects, and personnel were killed or wounded by fragments from explosions that came too fast to allow effective defensive measures. The psychological impact was even more devastating than the physical destruction. German soldiers who had survived years of combat on multiple fronts found themselves confronting a weapon system that seemed designed specifically to terrorize defenders through overwhelming firepower delivered from unexpected directions. The sound of incoming rockets created panic that spread through the entire defensive line, disrupting communications and coordination that made organized resistance impossible. Müller's position received direct hits from 6 rockets within 10 seconds, collapsing his bunker and killing 3 of his 4 crew members instantly. Müller himself survived only because he had been thrown clear by the first explosion, landing in a shell crater that provided minimal protection from subsequent impacts. The machine gun that had been his unit's primary weapon was completely destroyed, along with most of their ammunition and communication equipment. The entire rocket barrage lasted less than 3 minutes from first launch to final impact, but the effects on German defensive capabilities were immediate and catastrophic. Command bunkers were destroyed, communication lines were severed, and key defensive positions were abandoned by survivors who could no longer maintain organized resistance against follow-up attacks by conventional American forces. The Calliope had achieved in minutes what conventional artillery might have required hours to accomplish. Patterson's tank remained in firing position for additional missions, while conventional Sherman tanks and infantry advanced to exploit the gaps created by rocket bombardment. The Calliope's role was to provide immediate fire support for advancing forces while preventing German counterattacks that might restore defensive integrity. The psychological advantage was enormous. German forces could no longer feel secure in prepared positions that had previously provided effective protection against conventional attacks. The effectiveness of rocket bombardment exceeded American expectations, while demonstrating capabilities that German intelligence had never anticipated or prepared to counter. German anti-tank defenses were designed for engaging conventional armored vehicles at typical combat ranges, not for defending against rocket attacks delivered from positions beyond the reach of German weapons. The tactical revolution was immediate and obvious to observers on both sides. American infantry advancing behind the rocket barrage found German defensive positions in shambles, with surviving defenders too shocked and disorganized to offer effective resistance. Captain James Wilson, commanding the infantry company that followed Patterson's tank attack, reported, "The Germans were completely demoralized. Most of them surrendered immediately, and those who tried to fight back were too scattered to coordinate any effective defense. I've never seen anything like it." The German response to Calliope attacks was confused and ineffective, reflecting the complete surprise that American rocket systems had achieved through operational security and technological innovation. German commanders had no tactical doctrine for defending against mobile rocket launchers, no weapons specifically designed to counter such systems, and no psychological preparation for the overwhelming firepower that Sherman-mounted rockets could deliver with devastating precision. Follow-up rocket attacks throughout the day continued to demonstrate the system's effectiveness while establishing new tactical procedures for employing rocket-equipped tanks in combined arms operations. Each salvo confirmed that American industrial innovation had created a weapon system that exceeded German defensive capabilities, while providing psychological advantages that multiplied American tactical effectiveness beyond simple measures of explosive power delivered. The success of initial Calliope operations was documented through after-action reports, prisoner interrogations, and battlefield assessments that confirmed the weapon system's devastating impact on German morale and defensive effectiveness. American commanders recognized that they had acquired a tactical advantage that could significantly reduce casualties while accelerating breakthrough operations against prepared German positions that had previously required costly frontal assaults. By evening, Patterson's tank had fired 3 complete rocket salvos against different German positions, each attack achieving similar results of devastating physical destruction combined with psychological impact that disrupted German defensive coordination across wide areas. The Calliope had proven itself as both a precision weapon system and a psychological warfare tool that exceeded every expectation for its combat effectiveness and strategic value. Within hours of the first Calliope attacks during the Battle of the Bulge, German military communications began carrying desperate reports describing American weapons that exceeded anything in German experience or intelligence files. Field commanders transmitted fragmentary accounts of rocket attacks delivered by modified Sherman tanks, but the descriptions were so unprecedented that higher headquarters initially dismissed them as combat exaggeration or misidentification of conventional artillery strikes. The reality proved far more disturbing than initial reports suggested. Obergefreiter Weber, one of the few survivors of the initial rocket attack near Malmedy, was evacuated to a field hospital where his account of Sherman tanks firing dozens of rockets simultaneously was recorded by medical personnel who assumed he was suffering from combat fatigue or concussion-related hallucinations. Weber's insistence that American tanks had fired meteors from the sky seemed so improbable that his testimony was initially discredited, even though physical evidence at the attack site supported his descriptions. German intelligence services struggled to analyze fragmentary reports about American rocket systems that seemed to combine the mobility of tanks with the firepower of artillery batteries in ways that challenged fundamental assumptions about battlefield weapons and tactical possibilities. The concept of mounting multiple rocket launchers on tank chassis had never been considered by German engineers, despite their advanced work with rocket technology for other applications, including the V-1 and V-2 programs. The psychological impact on German forces was immediate and profound, creating fear that spread far beyond units that had directly experienced rocket attacks. Stories of Sherman tanks that could rain fire from the sky circulated through German communication networks faster than official intelligence reports, creating psychological pressure that affected German morale across entire sectors of the front where Calliope-equipped units had not yet appeared. German medical facilities began receiving casualties with blast injuries and psychological trauma that exceeded anything previously documented from conventional tank or artillery attacks. The rapid succession of explosions delivered by Calliope systems created concussion effects that left survivors with hearing damage, disorientation, and psychological conditions that German military medicine struggled to treat effectively. The medical evidence confirmed that American rocket systems were creating new categories of combat casualties. American commanders quickly recognized the strategic value of psychological warfare effects that Calliope attacks created among German forces, leading to expanded deployment of rocket-equipped tanks specifically for their morale impact rather than simple destructive capability. Intelligence reports indicated that German units were abandoning defensive positions after rumors of approaching rocket tanks spread through their communication networks, creating tactical advantages that exceeded the physical capabilities of the weapon systems themselves. The tactical effectiveness of Calliope systems exceeded American expectations, while demonstrating that mobile rocket launchers could provide capabilities that conventional artillery could not match in terms of rapid deployment, precision targeting, and psychological impact on enemy forces. Tank commanders reported that single rocket salvos could neutralize defensive positions that might have required hours of conventional artillery preparation to suppress effectively. German attempts to develop countermeasures against American rocket tanks were hampered by incomplete intelligence about the system's capabilities, deployment patterns, and technical specifications. German anti-tank teams found that engaging Calliope-equipped Shermans required different tactics than those used against conventional tanks, since rocket systems could deliver devastating firepower at ranges that exceeded German anti-tank weapon effectiveness, while remaining protected by tank armor. American industrial capacity enabled rapid expansion of Calliope production and deployment in response to combat success reports that confirmed the system's tactical value and strategic impact. By January 1945, more than 200 Sherman tanks had been equipped with rocket launching systems, representing production rates that exceeded German manufacturing capabilities for comparable weapons by factors that demonstrated overwhelming American industrial advantages. The propaganda value of Calliope operations was recognized by American psychological warfare specialists who began incorporating rocket attack footage and survivor testimonies into broadcasts designed to demoralize German forces while demonstrating American technological superiority. German soldiers listening to Allied radio broadcasts heard accounts of weapons that seemed to exceed rational limitations, creating additional psychological pressure on forces already struggling with material shortages and declining morale. German defensive doctrine underwent emergency revision as commanders attempted to develop tactics for defending against mobile rocket attacks that could appear without warning and deliver overwhelming firepower before defensive measures could be implemented. New regulations emphasized dispersed positions, improved camouflage, and rapid movement procedures designed to minimize exposure to rocket bombardment. But these measures proved largely ineffective against determined attacks. Allied forces worldwide began requesting American rocket launcher technology for their own armored units, recognizing that Calliope systems provided tactical advantages that could be applied across multiple theaters and operational situations. British, Canadian, and Free French commanders sought access to rocket-equipped tanks for breakthrough operations against prepared German positions that had proven resistant to conventional assault methods. The medical documentation of German casualties from rocket attacks provided scientific evidence of blast effects and psychological trauma that informed American understanding of weapon effectiveness while establishing new standards for measuring combat impact beyond simple measures of physical destruction. Medical officers noted that rocket attack survivors exhibited stress reactions that differed significantly from those caused by conventional weapons. German prisoner interrogations revealed consistent patterns of fear and demoralization related to rocket attacks that had occurred weeks or months earlier, indicating that psychological effects persisted long after physical wounds had healed. German soldiers described nightmares about rocket attacks, anxiety disorders triggered by aircraft sounds, and inability to maintain defensive positions when rumors circulated about approaching American rocket tanks. The strategic implications became apparent as German resistance began collapsing in sectors where Calliope-equipped American units operated, creating breakthrough opportunities that accelerated Allied advance rates while reducing casualties through psychological warfare effects that complemented physical destruction. American commanders recognized that rocket systems had provided force multiplication effects that exceeded their material costs and production requirements. The cultural impact within American forces was profound as tank crews gained confidence in weapons that provided overwhelming firepower advantages over any German defensive system. Sherman tank crews who had previously operated with caution due to German anti-tank weapon superiority suddenly felt empowered by rocket systems that could neutralize threats before close-range engagements became necessary. The overwhelming success of Calliope rocket systems during the Battle of the Bulge triggered systematic expansion of American mobile artillery programs that established the United States as the world leader in self-propelled rocket technology and tactical innovation. The integration of rocket launchers with tank platforms represented a fundamental advance in combined arms doctrine that influenced military thinking throughout the remainder of World War II and established principles that guided post-war weapons development for decades. American industrial capacity enabled mass production of rocket systems on scales that exceeded German manufacturing capabilities by enormous margins, despite German advances in rocket technology for strategic weapons programs. While German engineers focused on complex, expensive systems like the V-2 rocket for strategic bombardment missions, American manufacturers applied automotive production techniques to create simple, reliable rockets that could be produced in quantities sufficient to equip thousands of tank platforms simultaneously. The technological innovations developed for Calliope systems included advances in rocket propellant chemistry, guidance mechanisms, and launcher design that established American leadership in multiple fields related to rocket technology. American rockets featured more reliable ignition systems, better trajectory control, and higher production quality than comparable German weapons, while American launchers provided greater accuracy and faster reload capabilities than any existing rocket system. The strategic implications of mobile rocket technology extended far beyond immediate tactical applications to fundamental questions about the future of artillery and fire support in mechanized warfare. American success with tank-mounted rocket systems demonstrated that mobility and firepower could be combined in ways that exceeded the capabilities of traditional towed artillery, while providing psychological advantages that multiplied tactical effectiveness through fear and demoralization of enemy forces. International implications became apparent as Allied nations worldwide requested access to American rocket technology for their own military forces. Recognizing that Calliope systems provided capabilities that could enhance their tactical effectiveness while reducing casualties through superior firepower and psychological impact. The global demand for American rocket technology established American leadership in military innovation while providing diplomatic advantages through technical assistance programs. The economic analysis of rocket system production revealed cost advantages that amazed military planners accustomed to expensive, complex weapon systems that required extensive maintenance and specialized personnel. Calliope rockets could be manufactured for costs comparable to conventional artillery shells, while providing greater accuracy, longer range, and superior psychological impact that reduce the total ammunition requirements for achieving tactical objectives. American research and development programs expanded rapidly to explore additional applications for rocket technology, including air-to-ground systems, naval bombardment platforms, and anti-aircraft weapons that would provide comprehensive advantages across all domains of military operations. The success of land-based rocket systems encouraged investment in related technologies that would establish American dominance in guided weapons throughout the post-war period. The lessons learned from Calliope operations influenced American military doctrine regarding technological innovation, rapid deployment, and the importance of maintaining production capacity that could respond quickly to changing tactical requirements. American commanders recognized that industrial flexibility provided strategic advantages that enabled rapid adaptation to battlefield conditions while maintaining technological superiority over enemy forces. German attempts to develop comparable rocket systems were hampered by material shortages, industrial limitations, and strategic priorities that emphasized defensive weapons rather than offensive capabilities that could support mobile operations. German rocket programs focused on strategic bombardment missions that required complex, expensive systems rather than simple, reliable weapons that could be mass-produced for tactical applications. Post-war analysis revealed that American rocket technology had achieved tactical advantages that exceeded German comprehension during active combat operations, contributing to psychological effects that accelerated German defensive collapse while reducing American casualties through superior firepower and tactical innovation. German commanders never developed effective countermeasures against mobile rocket systems that combined surprise, overwhelming firepower, and psychological impact. The technological foundation established by Calliope development enabled American advances in guided missile technology, space exploration, and military applications that would dominate post-war technological competition while providing economic advantages through civilian applications of rocket technology developed for military purposes. The expertise gained through wartime rocket programs established American leadership in aerospace technology that continued throughout the Cold War period. The production techniques developed for military rocket manufacturing were applied to civilian industries after the war, creating technological advantages that supported American economic growth while establishing export markets for American technology and manufacturing expertise. Companies involved in Calliope production became leaders in post-war aerospace and defense industries that provided high-paying employment and technological innovation. The strategic lessons learned from rocket system deployment influenced American approaches to military research and development throughout subsequent decades, emphasizing rapid prototyping, industrial scalability, and tactical flexibility that enabled quick responses to changing threats while maintaining technological advantages over potential adversaries. The Calliope program became a model for successful military innovation that balanced technological sophistication with production efficiency. The transformation of the Sherman tank from a dismissed tin can into a platform for devastating rocket attacks represented more than tactical innovation. It demonstrated the power of American industrial creativity to turn perceived weaknesses into overwhelming strengths that redefined the possibilities of mechanized warfare. German forces that had mocked the Sherman's thin armor and weak gun discovered that American engineers had created something far more dangerous than a conventional tank. A mobile artillery platform that could deliver the firepower of an entire battery in the space of minutes. The irony was historically profound and strategically decisive. German commanders, who had spent years perfecting anti-tank tactics, found themselves confronting weapons that operated outside every category of their military experience and defensive planning. The Calliope had transformed the Sherman from a target into a terror weapon that could appear without warning and deliver destruction that exceeded anything in German defensive doctrine or psychological preparation. The human dimension of this transformation revealed the power of technological surprise to overcome tactical disadvantages and psychological barriers that had seemed insurmountable through conventional military approaches. American tank crews, who had feared encounters with superior German armor, suddenly possessed weapons that could neutralize enemy positions before close-range engagements became necessary, while German soldiers discovered that their carefully prepared defenses offered no protection against attacks that came from unexpected directions with overwhelming intensity. The strategic implications extended far beyond individual battles to fundamental questions about the nature of military innovation and the sources of tactical advantage in modern warfare. American success with rocket-equipped tanks proved that creative engineering could overcome apparent material disadvantages while providing capabilities that exceeded enemy understanding and defensive preparation, establishing principles that would guide military technology development for generations. The ultimate testament to American achievement lay in the speed and completeness with which Calliope systems transformed battlefield dynamics and psychological conditions during the crucial final months of European combat. German forces that had launched their last major offensive with confidence in their tactical superiority found themselves retreating in disorder before weapons they had never imagined and could not counter effectively. 4 rockets a second, enough to turn fear into fire and fire into victory. Stories like this reveal how American industrial ingenuity could transform even modest platforms into instruments of overwhelming power, proving that innovation and adaptability could triumph over tradition and rigid thinking. In the next episode, we'll explore another hidden American weapon that caught enemy forces completely unprepared while demonstrating the limitless creativity of American military engineering. Would you have stood your ground under such a storm? Subscribe now to uncover more of World War II's hidden secrets.